Very good morning to you once again, coming to you live here from the Woodlands Community Centre here in Mitchell's Plain. This is our live position for the better part of this morning, at least insofar as the AM report is concerned. We're joined this morning by Ian Cameron, who is with Action Society. In fact, he's the Director of Community Safety with that organisation. Ian, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for coming on. I've had a look at your statement as Action Society ahead of the State of the Nation address this evening, and there's one poignant line that just stands out for me. The appeal to the President that if our children are not safe, then where are we as a country?
Absolutely. So what we're basically saying is that if the most vulnerable people in society in South Africa are not safe, how on earth could we then be safe?
Yeah.
And just this past weekend, not far from where we're standing now, a 4-year-old boy was shot in the head and is still critical in hospital. Within the last few weeks, several children were shot, some dead, some survived, in gang crossfire in this area. Just last night, someone was shot in this specific area where we're standing now. And so the list goes on. And what we're saying to the President is, Mr. President, you need to say their names, because at the moment you're downplaying the reality that we face on ground level.
Well, as he delivers the State of the Nation address this evening, the crime statistics for 2022 tell us that over 26,000 people have been murdered in South Africa over the past year.
I think this will probably be, or let's say over the next 24 months, it will be the bloodiest 24 months that we've had in over 2 decades. At the moment, we're seeing 72 murders per day. At least 3 children are killed every single day in South Africa. And it's as though the capacity that's needed on ground level with regards to the police is not given. We keep hearing promises. We'll probably hear more of them tonight. None of them have been delivered. In the Cape Flats, as an example, we've seen several imbizos over the last 24 months, but we've seen 0 results. In fact, conditions on the ground for good cops trying to do their best and for communities have only deteriorated further.
Okay, now you've been deliberate in saying conditions on the ground for good cops. What does that say about what's on the flip side of that, and what role that plays in keeping gangsterism so alive and well in communities like this?
According to research, the Cape Flats, specifically around the Mitchell's Plain region, has between 100 and 130,000 gangsters that are operating in the area. So several different gangs. It's impossible for them to operate on the scale that they are currently operating in or under without some kind of influence from internal structures in terms of the criminal justice system. Now, in 2022, we heard from a specific judge in the Western Cape that the police has been captured in the Western Cape on provincial level. And I think we need to unashamedly call them out and say, but this is true. Because how on earth do we still see what's happening on ground level as it is now? The anti-gang unit is not resourced the way they are meant to be. We see empty promises. We speak to the cops on ground level, and they tell us that when they do make good arrests, they are transferred or intimidated, or some of them are even shot at. So how on earth are they meant to do their jobs when they can't, when they need to watch their backs on the inside but also on the outside? And then we see that conviction rates are at an all-time low. The point is, and it sounds very negative, unfortunately it is the reality, the point is we can't fix things on ground level if it's rotten at the top. And at the moment, I agree with that judge. The South African Police Service management in the Western Cape is captured by criminals.
And essentially there is no way that gangs can survive without exactly that.
Absolutely.
So what Action SA is doing, it's calling for a number of practical steps to be taken insofar as our police service is concerned, right? Among them is for our officers to take polygraph tests.
Polygraph test and make sure that it's merit appointments. The new Overberg district commander in the Western Cape that's just been appointed had several disciplinary hearings against her when she was a brigadier. She only entered the police in 2011. How on earth is she now being promoted from brigadier to major general, and she's got 0 policing experience? She was appointed in 2011 as a communication appointment. So that's in terms of merit appointments, and that's a reality across the board. You can speak to so many good cops on on the ground, they'll tell you, I've got 20, 30 years experience, I don't get a promotion because I do the right thing. But if you do the wrong thing, you are guaranteed to have a promotion in some cases. Then in terms of honest people being appointed, unfortunately political affiliation is a reality in the South African Police Service, and we need to go through the polygraph process as well as a skills audit to determine who is there according to merit, who not, and then we need to determine if they were involved in corruption through these polygraphs, who were all involved, and then we need to go through the process of investigating them and making an example of them, not just sending them on special leave. You know, a few months ago I posted a photo of a very renowned gangster in the Cape Flats posing in an anti-gang police vehicle. The police member whose vehicle was used in that photo was just put on special leave for a month. He's back at work. No investigation, no disciplinary action. In fact, the questions asked by management South African Police Service is who took the photo. Not why is there a renowned gangster posing in an anti-gang vehicle, showing his gang sign and smiling at the camera. They rather want to know who the whistleblower is.
And in the midst of all of this, Ian, it's these communities who live with gangsterism, right? As we've been standing here, children are going to school, people are trying to walk down the road to catch a taxi, to catch a bus. These are people who know that at 7 o'clock at night or even before then, I need to go inside, I need to lock my door, I need to bring my children in. There are times in the place where I live, outside my front door, where it's not safe. This is what these communities, Mitchell's Plain is one of them, it's Hanover Park, it's Bonteheuwel, it's Manenberg, and the list goes on and on.
We sometimes record, and this is just data that we record as civilians, just in a place like Manenberg, we have up to 15 shooting incidents in one weekend. In the Cape Flats as a whole, we have between 45 and 55 incidents per 48-hour weekend. And that's just conservative numbers. Remember, we don't have the access to all the data that the police might have. It's a reality that children in these areas are not safe, that they are exposed to violence, and unfortunately that gangs operate in a lot of the schools. So, the other day I was in Beacon Valley. Beacon Valley as an example, as the school was coming out in the afternoon, they start shooting in front of the school. About between 25 and 30 shots go off. All of the kids need to hide before they can come out of school. That is not normal. And just because it's the Cape Flats, we can't just, shrug and say, it's just another Cape Flats shooting. It can never be accepted that that should be the norm. We are exposed to an abnormal amount of violence, abnormal amount of trauma. How do we expect kids to build a sustainable future in a place like Ugulethe or Khayelitsha when they see the amount of shooting that they do?
This is such an important point that you're raising, because it's probably also the reason why kids of school-going age join gangs, for some level of perceived safety.
Absolutely, and I think we need an integrated approach. Remember, we can't just say it's just the police or it's just the court of law. When we see Minister Bheki Cele releasing crime stats, the Minister of Social Development or Correctional Services, of Justice, they should all be sitting there together. It must be an integrated approach, an integrated sharing of this data and the integrated solutions. The reason I say this, just this past week, we heard about how low reading competency amongst children is in South Africa. If we have kids that can't read, that are exposed to gangs, that see that as their only extracurricular activity, that they can get some sense of belonging, some sense of family, then we're going to have a society in South Africa that is flourishing in a criminal underworld. We are creating a criminal underworld. So we need to look at that. Many of the schools in these areas don't have extracurricular activities. Therefore, kids are exposed to violence on the street. So it's an integrated approach that we need to get these kids to not end up on the streets. And again, we need to focus on eliminating kingpins of these criminal organizations. If we don't do that, it's the same within the South African Police Service. If we don't fix the top level, we can't expect it to change on the bottom.
Ian Cameron, thanks very much indeed. Wow, painting an incredibly gloomy, that's definitely not the word. What a devastating picture it is of what communities like the one we are in faces every day. This community, Ian was just telling us, there was a shooting just some 12 hours ago. It's not unusual. There are 40 to 50 shootings regularly on weekends in a 24 to 48 hour period in communities like Woodlands, in Beacon Valley, in Bonteheuwel, in Manenberg, in Hanover Park. It's one of the big issues that we hope to hear something from the President about when he takes to the podium for the State of the Nation address this evening, and certainly I think for people who are able to watch, people who are not being load shed, certainly in Woodlands, in Beacon Valley, they'll be listening out for what Cyril Ramaphosa has to say.
Absolutely. It becomes difficult to imagine how there could be any kind of business as usual given the challenges that you, Ian, have just outlined for us. Michelle Craig, my co-anchor, live to us there from Mitchell's Plain. For now, thanks very much indeed.